The message arrived on a cold Tuesday morning in January. It came from deep space, traveling faster than light itself. And it changed everything humanity had ever known about its place in the universe. Admiral Kevin Shaw was drinking his third cup of coffee when the alert reached his desk. He was 62 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. He commanded the United Earth Defense Fleet from the carrier Relentless, a massive ship that floated in orbit above the blue planet below. For 30 years, he had trained soldiers for a war that everyone said would never happen. Now that war had finally arrived. The Galactic Council was a group of 12 alien species who had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. They controlled thousands of star systems and billions of lives. They had technology that made human science look like children playing with toys. And they had decided that humanity was a problem that needed to be solved. Lieutenant Amy Price walked onto the bridge with a tablet in her hands. She was young, barely 30, with short brown hair and a face that rarely showed fear. Today, however, her hands were shaking slightly as she handed the tablet to the Admiral. "Sir, this is the full translation of the Council's message," she said quietly. Shaw read it slowly. The words were formal and cold. The Galactic Council had watched humanity for 300 years. They had seen humans spread across their own solar system. They had monitored human technology as it grew more advanced each decade. And they had decided that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed freedom. The message gave Earth 48 hours to surrender. All human warships would be destroyed. All human colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter would be placed under alien control. Earth itself would be surrounded by a permanent blockade. Humanity would never be allowed to leave their home system again. Shaw put down the tablet and looked out the window at Earth below. 7 billion people lived on that planet. They were teachers and farmers and doctors and artists. They were mothers and fathers and children. And now an alien government on the other side of the galaxy had decided their fate without asking a single one of them. "Get me Secretary General Cruz," Shaw said calmly. Daniel Cruz was the leader of the United Earth government. He was a small man with glasses and a soft voice, but his mind was sharper than any weapon. He had spent his entire career preparing for this exact moment. When his face appeared on the screen, he did not look surprised or afraid. He looked almost relieved. "You've seen the message," Cruz said. It was not a question. "I have," Shaw replied. "What are your orders, sir?" Cruz was quiet for a long moment. Behind him, Shaw could see other officials moving quickly, their faces tense with worry. But Cruz himself remained still, like a man who had finally reached the end of a very long journey. "Admiral, do you know why the Council rejected our membership applications for 300 years? Shaw nodded. "They said we were too aggressive, too violent. They called us a young species that hadn't learned to control our worst impulses. They were afraid of us," Cruz said simply. "Not because of what we are, but because of what we might become. They saw our history of wars and conflicts, but they also saw something else. They saw how quickly we learned, how fast we adapted, how we never gave up, no matter how many times we failed." He leaned forward, his eyes bright behind his glasses. "They rejected us because they knew that if we ever got a seat at their table, we would eventually run it. They've spent 10,000 years building an empire based on fear and control. And they recognized in us the one thing that could destroy it all." "What's that, sir?" Shaw asked. "Hope," Cruz replied. "We give people hope. We always have. It's our greatest strength and our most dangerous weapon." Shaw felt something stir in his chest. It was an old feeling, one he had almost forgotten. It was the feeling of purpose. "So what do we do now?" he asked. Cruz smiled. It was a small smile, but it held 300 years of patience and planning behind it. Now we show them why they were right to be afraid. Across Earth, things began to happen. In shipyards hidden beneath the Rocky Mountains, engineers started working on machines that had been waiting for decades. Under the ice of Antarctica, weapon systems that officially did not exist began powering up. On the dark side of the moon, doors that had been sealed since the last century slowly opened. General Patricia Webb received her orders in a bunker beneath the Pacific Ocean. She was 55 years old, with silver hair and a reputation for never losing a battle. She had trained her entire life for this moment, just like her mother before her and her grandmother before that. 3 generations of her family had prepared for the day when humanity would finally have to fight for its survival. How long until we're ready? Asked a young captain named Danny Lopez. Webb looked at the screens around her. They showed ships coming online across the solar system. Fighters launching from hidden bases. Soldiers waking from cryosleep after years of waiting. We've been ready for 100 years, she said quietly. We just needed permission. On the streets of New York and Tokyo and Lagos and São Paulo, people watched the news with fear and confusion. They had always known that aliens existed, that they had also believed that contact would be peaceful. Now, they were learning that the universe was not as friendly as they had hoped, but mixed with the fear was something else. It was anger. It was determination. It was the stubborn human refusal to accept defeat before the fight had even begun. In a small apartment in Chicago, a young woman named Rosa Martinez watched the emergency broadcast with her 2 children. They asked her if the aliens were going to hurt them. She thought about lying, about telling them everything would be fine. But instead, she told them the truth. I don't know what's going to happen, she said, holding them close. But I know that we're going to fight. And I know that humans have never lost when we really needed to win. 48 hours later, the Galactic Council's invasion fleet entered the solar system. They expected to find a primitive species ready to surrender. They were wrong. The Velthari were the warriors of the Galactic Council. They had conquered 100 worlds and had never lost a single war. Their Grand Admiral, a creature named Zixter, commanded 2,000 warships as they entered the human solar system. He expected the mission to take less than a week. Captain Lisa Grant watched the alien fleet approach on her screens. She was 40 years old, with red hair and green eyes that never seemed to blink when danger was near. Her ship, the destroyer Iron Will, was positioned at the edge of the asteroid belt, right in the path of the incoming enemy. Captain, we're detecting over 2,000 enemy vessels, reported her sensor officer, a young man named Carlos Vega. They outgun us by a factor of 20 to 1. Lisa nodded slowly. She had expected this. Everyone had expected this. The aliens thought they were bringing overwhelming force to crush a primitive enemy. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Open a channel to their flagship, she ordered. The face that appeared on her screen was not human. Zixter had blue skin, 4 eyes, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. He looked at Lisa with an expression that mixed confusion with amusement. Human vessel, he said through the translator. You are outnumbered and outmatched. Surrender now, and your crew will be allowed to live. Resist, and you will be destroyed. Lisa leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. Around her, her crew was silent, waiting. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. They had run the simulations 1,000 times. They knew exactly what was about to happen. Admiral, Lisa said calmly, I'm going to give you one chance to turn your fleet around and go home. Not because we're afraid of you, but because what's about to happen isn't going to be pleasant for your people. Zixter laughed. It was a harsh sound, like metal scraping against stone. You threaten us? One tiny ship against 2,000? You humans truly are as insane as the report suggested. Maybe, Lisa replied with a small smile. Or maybe we just know something you don't. She ended the transmission. "Battle stations," she said quietly. "It's time to show them who we really are." The Valkyrie fleet opened fire first. A wave of energy weapons shrieked across space toward the Iron Will. They expected to see the human ship explode in a ball of fire. Instead, the shots passed through empty space. The Iron Will had already moved, faster than the Valkyrie computers could track. Human ships were smaller than their alien counterparts, but they were also quicker and more agile. Lisa's crew performed maneuvers that alien pilots considered impossible. And then the asteroids began to wake up. For over a century, human engineers had been secretly placing weapons platforms throughout the asteroid belt. Thousands of them, hidden in rocks and ice, waiting for the day they would be needed. Now they activated all at once, filling space with a deadly crossfire of missiles and railgun rounds. Commander Jake Morrison led the first wave of human fighters into the battle. He was 35 years old, the son of a pilot and the grandson of a pilot. His family had been preparing for this war for 3 generations. When he climbed into his cockpit that morning, he carried their hopes and dreams with him. "All wings engage," he ordered through his radio. "Show them what humans can do." The human fighters were small and fast, like angry bees attacking a group of elephants. They swarmed around the Valkyrie ships, striking at weak points and then disappearing before the enemy could respond. Their pilots had grown up flying these machines, learning every trick and technique that could give them an advantage. The Valkyrie were experienced warriors, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Their ships were designed to fight other large vessels, not swarms of tiny attackers that moved like ghosts. Their commanders tried to adapt, but the humans were always one step ahead. Admiral Shaw watched the battle from the bridge of the Relentless, his flagship. He had spent 30 years preparing for this moment, and now it was finally here. Around him, his officers worked with calm efficiency, coordinating the human forces across the entire solar system. "Admiral, the enemy fleet is taking heavy losses," reported Lieutenant Price. "They've lost over 300 ships in the first hour." Shaw nodded but did not smile. This was not a game. Real people were dying out there, both human and alien. But the battle had to be won, no matter the cost. "Tell General Webb to launch the second wave," he ordered, "and have Captain Grant move to capture the enemy flagship. I want their admiral alive, if possible." Lisa Grant received the order with a grim smile. Her ship had been dancing through the battle for hours, somehow avoiding every enemy attack. Now it was time to end it. The Iron Will accelerated toward the Valkyrie flagship, weaving between explosions and debris. Enemy guns tried to track her, but she was always too fast, always one step ahead. Her crew worked together like a single organism, each person knowing exactly what to do without being told. They reached the flagship in less than 10 minutes. Lisa ordered her Marines to board the alien vessel while her gunners disabled its engines. The fighting inside was brutal and short. Human soldiers moved through the alien corridors with practiced efficiency, taking control of key systems and capturing enemy officers. When Lisa finally stepped onto the bridge of the Valkyrie flagship, she found Grand Admiral Zixter waiting for her. He looked smaller now, surrounded by human soldiers, his 4 eyes filled with something she had never seen in a Valkyrie before. It was fear. "How?" he whispered. "How did you do this? We have conquered 100 worlds. We have never been defeated." Lisa looked at him with something that might have been pity. "You've never fought humans before. We've been waiting for you for 300 years. We built our ships specifically to beat yours. We trained our people specifically to fight your tactics. You thought you were attacking a primitive species. You were wrong." She turned to face the massive window behind the Admiral's chair. Outside, the remains of the Valkyrie fleet were scattered across space like broken toys. Less than 100 enemy ships remained, and they were all surrendering. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," Lisa ordered. "Tell them that their declaration of war has been accepted. And tell them that if they want to surrender, we're willing to listen." Across the solar system, humans watched the news and celebrated. They had won the first battle. But everyone knew that the war was just beginning. The Council would send more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. This was only the start. But for the first time in 300 years, humanity had proven something important. They were not victims. They were not conquered people waiting to be saved. They were fighters, warriors, survivors, and they were just getting started. The news of the human victory spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within days, every species in Council Space had heard the story of how a small fleet from a quarantined world had destroyed the mighty Velthari Armada. For most aliens, it seemed impossible. The Velthari had never been beaten. They were the Council's strongest warriors, but the truth was spreading. And with it came something dangerous. Hope died on the forest world of Kethera. A young woman named Trill heard the broadcasts while hiding in a cave with her resistance cell. She was barely 20 years old, with green skin and large dark eyes. Her people, the Kethani, had been slaves of the Council for 600 years. They worked in the forests, harvesting rare plants for alien medicine, never allowed to leave their world or choose their own fate. "Is it true?" asked her brother, a thin boy named Kor. "Did the humans really win?" Trill listened to the broadcast again, her heart beating fast. The voice was alien, but the words were translated clearly. A primitive species from a quarantined star system had defeated 2,000 Velthari warships. The impossible had happened. "It's true," she whispered. "It's really true." That night she made a decision that would change the history of her people. She sent a message into space, hoping that someone would hear it. 3 weeks later, humans arrived. General Marcus Webb led the Liberation Fleet personally. He was a quiet man in his late 50s, with kind eyes and steady hands. He had spent his entire military career preparing for missions like this. Not conquest, but liberation. Not war for territory, but war for freedom. His fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Kethera and immediately began broadcasting a message to the planet below. "People of Kethera, we are humans from Earth. We are not here to conquer you. We are not here to replace your oppressors with new ones. We are here to help you free yourselves. If you want our help, we are ready to give it." The response came within hours. Trill and thousands of other Kethani emerged from their hiding places, ready to fight. They had waited 600 years for this moment. Sergeant Nicole Hayes led the first human team to land on Kethera's surface. She was 30 years old, tough and practical, with short black hair and arms covered in tattoos. Her team carried crates of weapons and supplies, gifts from Earth to the Kethani resistance. "These are simple to use," Nicole told Trill as she handed her a rifle. "Point at the enemy. Pull the trigger. We'll teach you more later, but for now, this is enough." Trill held the weapon carefully. It was heavier than she expected, cold and hard in her hands. She had never killed anyone before, but she had watched the Council's soldiers kill her parents when she was a child, and she had spent every day since then dreaming of revenge. "Thank you," she said quietly. "But why? Why are you helping us? You don't even know us." Nicole smiled. It was a sad smile, full of understanding. "Because we know what it feels like to be looked down on. To be told you're not good enough, not advanced enough, not worthy of respect. The Council did that to us for 300 years. We're not going to let them do it to anyone else." The liberation of Kethera took less than a month. The Council's garrison was small and unprepared. They had never expected the Kethoni to fight back, and they certainly never expected help from outside. When the last enemy soldiers surrendered, Trill stood in the capital city and watched as the council's flag was torn down in its place. The Kethany raised their own flag for the first time in 6 centuries. And next to it, as a symbol of friendship, they raised an Earth flag too. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On ice worlds and desert planets, in space stations and underground cities, oppressed species rose up against their masters. The humans could not be everywhere at once, but they did not need to be. Their example was enough. Back on Earth, President Maria Santos addressed the United Nations. She was a small woman with iron gray hair and a voice that could fill any room. "We did not start this war," she said, her words broadcast to billions of people. "The Council declared war on us because they were afraid of what we might become. They called us violent and aggressive and primitive. And you know what? Maybe they were right." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Humans are capable of great violence. Our history proves that. But we are also capable of great love, great sacrifice, and great courage. We fight not because we enjoy destruction, but because some things are worth fighting for. Freedom is worth fighting for. Dignity is worth fighting for. The right of every thinking being to choose their own destiny is worth fighting for." Her eyes seemed to look through the cameras and into the hearts of everyone watching. The Council built an empire on fear. They conquered by making species afraid to resist. But fear only works when you have nothing to hope for. We are giving the galaxy something to hope for. And that is more powerful than any weapon. Dr. Henry Cole worked day and night at the new Interspecies Medical Center on Mars. He was a xenobiologist, an expert in alien life forms. Now he was using his knowledge to help the species that had been freed from Council control. Many of them were sick. The Council had not bothered to provide proper health care to their slaves. Disease and malnutrition were common. Henry and his team worked to heal them, combining human medicine with alien knowledge to create treatments that neither could have developed alone. "You don't have to do this," said a Kethany doctor named Vel. "We are strangers to you. Why do you care if we live or die?" Henry looked up from his work and smiled. "Because that's what humans do. We help people. It's not complicated. We just help because helping is right." Admiral Shaw received reports from across the galaxy. Every day brought news of new rebellions, new liberations, new allies joining the human cause. The Council's empire was crumbling faster than anyone had predicted. But Shaw knew that the war was not over yet. The Council still had massive fleets in reserve. They still controlled the core worlds, the richest and most powerful systems in the galaxy. And they were not going to give up without a final, desperate fight. "How many worlds have joined us?" he asked Lieutenant Price. 47 confirmed, sir. "More every day." Shaw nodded slowly, his old eyes thoughtful. "And the Council?" "They're gathering their remaining forces at Primara, their capital world. It looks like they're preparing for a final stand." Shaw stood and walked to the window. Outside, human ships moved through space alongside vessels from a dozen different species. It was a sight that would have been unimaginable just a few months ago. "Then that's where we'll end this," he said quietly. "One way or another." Primara was the oldest inhabited world in the galaxy. It had been the home of the first spacefaring civilization, and for 10,000 years it had served as the capital of the Galactic Council. Its cities were ancient and beautiful, filled with towers that touched the clouds and gardens that had been tended for centuries. No enemy had ever set foot on its surface until now. The combined human and allied fleet arrived in Primara's star system on a cold morning in early spring. Admiral Shaw commanded the human forces from the bridge of the Relentless, while ships from 20 different species flew alongside him. It was the largest fleet ever assembled against the Council, and every being in it knew that the fate of the galaxy would be decided in the coming hours. "Admiral, we're detecting the Council's defensive fleet. reported Lieutenant Price. Over 5,000 ships, arranged in a sphere around the planet. Shaw studied the display carefully. The Council had gathered every remaining warship for this final battle. They knew that if they lost here, their empire would fall forever. They would fight with the desperation of creatures who had everything to lose. "Open a channel to all ships," Shaw ordered. "It's time." His voice went out to every vessel in the fleet. Human and alien alike, they all heard his words. "Today, we finish what the Council started." They declared war on humanity because they were afraid of us. They tried to destroy us before we could become a threat to their power. They failed. He paused, his old eyes scanning the faces of his crew. But this battle isn't just about revenge. It isn't about making them pay for what they tried to do. It's about something bigger. It's about creating a galaxy where no species has to live in fear, where no one is enslaved or oppressed, where every thinking being has the right to choose their own destiny. He straightened in his chair, his voice growing stronger. The Council ruled through fear for 10,000 years. Today, we end that. Today, we show the galaxy that a better future is possible. Not because we're stronger than them, but because we're fighting for something worth believing in. He turned to his weapons officer. "All ships, engage." The battle for Primar was the largest in galactic history. Thousands of ships clashed into space around the ancient world, filling the void with fire and light. Human destroyers led the charge, their speed and agility creating chaos in the Council's defensive lines. Allied vessels followed, each species bringing its own unique strengths to the fight. Captain Lisa Grant commanded the assault on the Council's flagship, the massive vessel that served as the mobile headquarters of the 12 ruling species. Her ship, the Iron Will, had become famous throughout the galaxy as the vessel that had captured the Velthari Admiral. Now she was hunting even bigger prey. "Captain, the flagship is heavily defended," warned Carlos Vega. "They've got 3 layers of escort ships and automated defense platforms covering every approach." Lisa smiled grimly. "Then we'll just have to be creative. All hands, prepare for attack pattern Omega." What followed was a maneuver that would be studied in military academies for centuries. The Iron Will accelerated to maximum speed, heading directly toward the flagship as if on a suicide run. Enemy ships moved to intercept, concentrating their fire on the seemingly reckless human vessel. At the last moment, Lisa ordered her ship to rotate, using its momentum to spin around the edge of the enemy formation while releasing a cloud of decoys. The Council ships wasted precious seconds shooting at the false targets while the Iron Will slipped past their defenses. By the time they realized their mistake, Lisa's Marines were already boarding the flagship. Commander Jake Morrison led his fighter squadron through the chaos of the battle, protecting the larger ships as they pressed their attack. He had lost count of how many enemy fighters he had destroyed, but he knew that every one of them meant one less threat to his friends and allies. "Commander, we've got a group of bombers heading for the Relentless," reported one of his pilots. "They're carrying heavy torpedoes." Jake turned his fighter toward the new threat. "Not on my watch. All wings, follow me." The human pilots intercepted the bombers before they could reach the Admiral's ship. It was a close fight, brutal and fast, with explosions filling the space around them. Jake's fighter took damage, its systems flickering as he pushed it beyond its limits. But he kept fighting, kept protecting, kept doing his duty. When the last bomber exploded, he allowed himself a moment to breathe. Then he turned back toward the battle, ready to do it all again. Inside the Council's flagship, Ambassador Patricia Lane walked through corridors filled with smoke and the sounds of fighting. She was not a soldier, but she had insisted on being part of the boarding party. If there was any chance of ending this war with words instead of more bloodshed, she wanted to be there to take it. Corporal Danny Reeves walked beside her, his rifle ready for any threat. He was young, just 23, a farm boy from Nebraska who had never imagined he would be walking through an alien starship at the heart of a galactic war. "Ambassador, are you sure about this?" he asked nervously. "It's pretty dangerous in here." Patricia smiled at him. "The most important things always are, Corporal. That's why they're worth doing." They found the council chamber at the heart of the ship. It was a vast room, filled with floating platforms where representatives of the 12 elder species sat in judgment over the galaxy. Now those platforms were dark. The representatives huddled together in fear as human. Soldiers secured the entrances. Patricia walked into the center of the room alone. She was a small woman, unarmed and dressed in simple civilian clothes. But she carried herself with a dignity that made the ancient rulers of the galaxy seem small by comparison. "Members of the Galactic Council," she said calmly, "I am Ambassador Patricia Lane of the United Earth Government. I am here to discuss the terms of your surrender." The eldest council member rose from his seat. He was a creature of pure energy, ancient beyond human understanding, one of the first beings ever to travel between stars. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Surrender? We do not surrender. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. We will not bow to primitives." Patricia nodded as if she had expected this response. "Then let me explain what will happen if you don't surrender. Outside this room, the battle is already turning against you. Your fleet is being destroyed piece by piece. Your subject worlds are rising up against you. Every hour that passes, you lose more ships, more soldiers, more power." She took a step closer, her voice steady and calm. "You can keep fighting. You can sacrifice thousands more lives, trying to preserve what's left of your empire. And in the end, you will still lose. Or you can accept reality now and save countless lives on both sides." The council members looked at each other. They had ruled through fear for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to be the ones who were afraid. Now they were learning. "What do you want?" The eldest finally asked. Patricia smiled. "We want what we've always wanted. A seat at the table. A voice in how the galaxy is run. And freedom for every species that has lived under your control." The negotiation lasted 3 days. In the end, the council agreed to dissolve. A new galactic assembly would be formed with equal representation for all species. The old empire would become a community of free and independent worlds. When Patricia walked out of the council chamber, she found Admiral Shaw waiting for her. "It's done," she said simply. "They've agreed to our terms." Shaw looked at her with something that might have been wonder. "You just ended a 10,000-year empire with words." Patricia shook her head. "No, the soldiers ended it. The pilots ended it. The engineers and doctors and everyone who worked for this moment ended it. I just helped them see that fighting was pointless." She looked out a window at the ancient world of Primara spinning slowly below. Somewhere down there, billions of beings were learning that the galaxy had changed forever. "Now comes the hard part," she said quietly. "Building something better." 1 year had passed since the fall of the Galactic Council. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than in the previous 1,000 years combined. Old borders dissolved. Ancient enemies became allies. Species that had never been allowed to leave their homeworlds now traveled freely among the stars. Admiral Kevin Shaw stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, the massive space platform that served as the new headquarters of the Galactic Assembly. He was 63 now, older and more tired than he had ever been. But there was a peace in his eyes that had not been there during the war. Below him, ships from 100 different species docked and departed. Valtteri traders exchanged goods with human merchants. Cathany students attended classes alongside beings from worlds they had never heard of before. The station hummed with the sounds of a dozen languages, all mixing together into something new and beautiful. "You look thoughtful," said a voice behind him. He turned to find Lisa Grant walking toward him with 2 cups of coffee. She was an admiral now, too, one of the most respected officers in the combined fleet. Her red hair had started to show streaks of gray, but her green eyes were as sharp as ever. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Shaw replied, accepting the cup. "A year ago, we were fighting for our survival. Now look at this place." Lisa stood beside him and looked out at the busy station. A group of children ran past, laughing and playing. Some were human. Others had blue skin or 4 arms or bodies made of living crystal. They did not seem to notice their differences. To them, they were just friends. "Do you think it will last?" she asked quietly. Shaw was silent for a long moment. It was a fair question. Empires had risen and fallen throughout galactic history. Peace was always temporary. Conflicts always returned eventually. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "But I know that we've given them a chance. We've shown them that there's another way to live. That fear doesn't have to rule everything." He smiled slightly. "My grandmother used to say that you can't control the future. You can only plant seeds and hope they grow. Well, we've planted a lot of seeds this year. The rest is up to them." In the assembly hall at the heart of the station, representatives from hundreds of species gathered for their weekly meeting. Ambassador Patricia Lane sat in the human section, listening as delegates debated trade agreements and border disputes. It was boring work, filled with endless arguments over small details. But it was also the most important work in the galaxy. Beside her sat Trill, the Kethany resistance fighter who had sent the first message to Earth. She was now the official representative of her people, a role she still struggled to believe was real. "Is it always like this?" Trill asked, watching 2 delegates argue about shipping routes. "So much talking and so little action?" Patricia laughed softly. "Welcome to democracy. It's slow and frustrating, and sometimes nothing seems to get done. But it's still better than having one group make all the decisions for everyone else." Trill thought about this for a moment. Her people had never been allowed to make decisions. For 600 years, every part of their lives had been controlled by the Council. Now they were free, but freedom was harder than she had expected. "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you humans stay so patient? You fought your way across the galaxy in a few months, but now you're willing to sit and talk for hours about things that don't seem important." Patricia turned to look at her, her expression thoughtful. "Because fighting was never the goal. We didn't go to war because we wanted to conquer the galaxy. We went to war because we wanted this." She gestured at the assembly hall, a place where everyone has a voice, where problems are solved with words instead of weapons. This is what we were always working toward. She paused, her eyes distant. "Humans have a saying, talk is cheap, but that's not true. Talk is precious. The ability to sit down with your enemies and work out your differences without killing each other is the most valuable thing in the universe. We fought so hard so that we can have the chance to talk." On the station's medical deck, Dr. Henry Cole was finishing his rounds. He had treated patients from over 50 different species in the past year. Each one had been a puzzle, a unique set of challenges that required creativity and patience to solve. He loved every minute of it. His current patient was a Velthari soldier who had been wounded in the final battle. The same species that had tried to conquer Earth was now being healed by human doctors. The irony was not lost on either of them. "I still don't understand," the soldier said as Henry checked his bandages. "We tried to destroy your people. We killed many of your friends. Why do you help me now?" Henry sat down beside the bed and looked at the soldier carefully. He remembered the war, remembered the friends he had lost, remembered the fear and the anger that had filled those terrible months. "Because the war is over," he said simply. "And because you're hurt and I can help. That's enough for me." The soldier was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, more uncertain. My people were taught that violence is strength, that mercy is weakness, that the only way to survive is to be the strongest, the most ruthless, the most feared. He looked down at his bandaged body. But your people beat us while showing mercy. You freed slaves instead of making new ones. You healed enemies instead of killing them. He looked up at Henry with confusion in his 4 eyes. How is that possible? How can you be so strong and so kind at the same time? Henry smiled. Because strength isn't about hurting people. It's about having the power to hurt and choosing not to. Anyone can destroy. Building something takes real strength. Healing takes real strength. Forgiveness takes real strength. He stood up and patted the soldier's shoulder gently. You'll understand eventually. We all have a lot to learn from each other. That evening, a ceremony was held in the station's central garden. It was the first anniversary of the peace treaty, and beings from across the galaxy had gathered to celebrate. Admiral Shaw stood on the stage with the other leaders who had brought the war to its end. Beside him were Lisa Grant and Patricia Lane, General Marcus Webb and Dr. Henry Cole. Behind them stood representatives from the liberated worlds, including Trill and others who had risked everything for freedom. Shaw stepped forward to address the crowd. He was not a man who enjoyed speeches, but this moment deserved words. 1 year ago, the Galactic Council declared war on humanity. They thought they were crushing a threat before it could grow. They thought they were protecting their power and their way of life. He paused, looking out at the thousands of faces watching him. Human faces. Alien faces. All of them together. They were right that we were a threat, but not in the way they expected. We weren't a threat because of our weapons or our ships. We were a threat because of what we represent. Hope. Freedom. The belief that every thinking being deserves to choose their own destiny. He smiled, a rare expression on his weathered face. The Council spent 10,000 years building an empire based on fear. We've spent 1 year building something based on trust. It's not perfect. It's not finished. It may never be finished. But it's a start. And it's ours. The crowd cheered. Humans and aliens alike raised their voices together, celebrating not just the end of war, but the beginning of something new. Something better. Something that had never existed before in all of galactic history. Later that night, Shaw found himself alone on the observation deck once again. The celebration was still going on behind him, but he needed a moment of quiet. Lisa found him there, as she always seemed to. You should be enjoying the party, she said. I am, he replied. In my own way. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, new friendships were being formed. New discoveries were being made. New adventures were beginning. Do you think they'll remember us? Lisa asked. 1,000 years from now, when all of this is ancient history. Shaw considered the question carefully. I don't know. Maybe they'll forget the names and the faces. Maybe they'll forget the battles and the treaties. But I hope they'll remember the idea. The belief that things can always get better. That fear doesn't have to win. That friendship is stronger than war. He turned to look at her, his old eyes bright with something that might have been hope. The Galactic Council declared war on humanity because they thought we were dangerous. They were right. We are dangerous to tyrants and oppressors and anyone who tries to build their power on the suffering of others. But we're also something else. He looked back out at the stars, at the galaxy that was now free because of what humans had done and what they had inspired. We're proof that the universe can be kind, that creatures can choose to help each other instead of hurt each other, that the story doesn't have to end in darkness. He smiled. That's what we gave the galaxy. That's what they'll remember. Not our victories or our defeats, but the idea that a better future is always possible. And somewhere out there, across 100 worlds and 1,000 stars, that idea was already spreading, growing, becoming something bigger than any single species or any single moment. The war was over. The real work had just begun.